Hey, I'm Brian Van, SportbikeTracker.com, and today we're going to break down our Woodcraft Rearset install on our 2018 Kawasaki Ninja 400 STG project bike. Okay, so let's first address, because this is kind of a newer bike, hey man, why would you want to put a set of rear sets in your bike? The thing already comes with foot pegs from the factory. That's easy to answer. Historically, bikes like this are manufactured so that the ergos are super comfortable and just very inviting for first-time riders. What that means with rear sets is, guess what? Your pegs from the factory are going to be super low. Once you figure out how to ride this thing, and especially if you're going to take it to a racetrack, you're going to find pretty quick that you don't have the ground clearance that you'd like to use, the lean angle that you would like. And that's kind of an advanced thing. It takes maybe a little while to get there, okay? So if you're not doing that on day one, don't worry about it. So that's reason one, would be more ground clearance. Reason two, adjustability, okay? This particular kit right here offers 12 different positions of adjustment to choose from, okay? Every one of them results in a position that is higher in terms of the foot peg position, higher than stock and further back than stock. And it's because these things have, you know, these kind of real spacious ergos from the factory, okay? The adjustment span is very massive. It's like 25 to 50 millimeters up and somewhere in the same vicinity, maybe as far as 54 millimeters back, okay? So there's a wide range. I talk about that more later on. You can see where the foot peg, it's eccentric. You're able to move it around. We have eccentric toe pieces, able to adjust those as well. Solid foot pegs that do not fold up. That's also a nice benefit. They offer more feel, is number one. Okay, and the foot pegs that fold up, if you drop your bike, guess what they do? Well, they fold right up the minute you drop your bike. And that opens the door for like smashing your exhaust, you know, maybe more fairing damage, engine cover damage, those kind of things. So the solid mount foot peg too can be a benefit in the event of a tip over. Also provides much more feedback than your stock pegs. When it's rigid mounted like that, you're gonna feel a lot more through the pegs, through your boots, you know, and when you're riding the bike, the thing's continually talking to you. So if you're listening and you're in tune with it, you know, it just kind of helps make the riding experience that much better, makes you even better in terms of a rider. Features, okay? And this is one minor limitation with this. The OE brake light switch cannot be reused with this configuration. I kind of would have liked to have seen him blend that into this. There must have been some engineering restrictions that just didn't allow it for it to happen. You can get around that by installing right here on top of the master a brake light banjo bolt switch. Just a little switch right here, two wires wired into the same harness where that OE brake light switch goes. Rebleed the brakes, piece of cake, very minor expense. Options that are available are that. There also is a return spring for the rear brake. If you want to have a stronger return for the rear brake, and this is a really optional thing, they have a little spring kit that you can purchase at the same time, put that in here in the master cylinder area, and it just makes sure that it snaps back nice and quick. What does that do for you? That can kind of help reduce drag back here on the rear rotor, you know, and on a bike like this, honestly, a little bit of drag can eat some horsepower. Do you have to have that? The answer to that is no, that's really not a big deal. A final option would be folding toe pieces. If you want toe pieces that are going to fold back in the event of a crash, they have those. The kits stock are going to ship with the fixed toe pieces, and honestly, these are what are most commonly used. On the shift side of the motorcycle, this kit is able to accommodate both standard shift, and that's the shift pattern that you get from the factory, or reverse GP shift. We found through the install that if we're going to do the GP shift, that looking at the sprocket cover, there was just a little bit of interference there. We're going to talk about that. If you're a rider who's going to do track days and race and you want to go to GP shift with this, there's just a minor little adjustment you're going to need to make to that sprocket cover, and it's going to get you to where you want to be. Beyond that, solid engineering, great stuff on the shift side of the bike. All in all, what do I think of the kit? I think it's a high quality kit if you're in the market for rear sets. Woodcraft is a phenomenal choice. There's a lot of great reasons for it. Engineering certainly is one of them. Availability of replacement parts is another. If you like what you see so far, you're interested in this kit, need a little help putting it on, you want to see step by step what it takes to make that happen, just watch. We'll show you everything after this. Okay, with the Woodcraft Ninja 400 rear set kit, everything comes disassembled. So before we can really begin the installation, we have to get it all put together. We're going to open up on the brake side of the motorcycle. That's where I typically like to start. Our brake pedal, thread locker is a must here. Blue thread locker. Begin by assembling the brake pedal. We can then mount that to the Rearset bracket. They're using all high quality hardware here. Tapered fasteners, which is nice because you get a lot of mechanical grip from that too. There's a lot of surface area there. So not only are we using the blue thread locker, but we also have that mechanical grip from that tapered seat fastener. 4mm internal hex here. There are 12 different positions to choose from when you're dialing these rear sets in. You're able to go up from 25 to 50 millimeters and back from 35 to 54 millimeters. So that's quite a range. We're going to final torque these. This is permanent now, okay? Remember with Woodcraft too, all these individual pieces are available if you have the need. The toe piece is also adjustable. What he's using here is it's an eccentric design. Got a locator pin, hole drilled off center, hole here in the center with all the holes around it. So you're able to fine tune the pedal tip itself. Additionally, if you want to get the folding pedal tips, those are available as an option. I'm going to kind of spitball it here. Feel like, you know what? It's about where I want to begin. Same gig, just a little bit of thread locker on this. There is a strong possibility that down the road, we're going to need to pull this back apart to dial the adjustment in. I kind of have a rough starting point in mind, even for the toe piece. Now before you torque that, you need to make sure that that is seated. Okay. Next up, mounting the foot peg to the bracket. On the brake side, there are 2 foot peg holes to choose from. Okay, once again, that eccentric design, same as we showed you with that toe piece. On the shift side, what's interesting is there's 1 foot peg hole with an eccentric, but there are 2 mounting holes where it bolts to the frame. Okay, so whatever we choose on one side, we have to mimic that on the other side. It's just going to look a little bit different. Okay, I know for me and for what I'm doing with this, I don't want to start off, because I'm a bigger guy, the seat height is lower, I don't want to start off all the way up and back with the rear sets, okay? That's really not where I want to be. I want to have a little bit of comfort and operating room, because realistically, most of the riding that I'm doing with this bike currently is being done on the street. I do like the idea of being back, okay? So in order to be back, the hole would need to lead the pin. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the lower hole. I'm going to go right here. Now remember, whatever I do here, we have to mirror that on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and put a little thread locker in here. Strong possibility we'll come back to this later and make another adjustment, especially once we take this motorcycle to the racetrack. Odds are, once we get there, we're going to want to have a little more ground clearance. I'll actually choose the right size T-handle that time. It's a 6mm internal hex. Another tapered seat fastener. Okay, that is torqued and ready to go. Now, the shift pedal needs to be mounted to the actual rear set bracket itself. They've supplied most of the hardware to do that. You will, however, need to disassemble, remove the brake pedal from your OE rear set to retrieve this washer. Okay, this washer then slides over this. This is the pivot for the brake pedal itself. Notice it has a groove in the center. That's meant to hold some grease so this thing stays well lubricated. Okay, looking at the instructions, it's really clear how this thing mounts up, especially more so if I turn it over and look at the right side of it. This is going to have that washer installed there. We're going to grease this up here in a second. Okay, it's going to slide through here like this. The short fastener is going to be used on the other side of this washer like so, and that's just going to hold the pivot in the brake pedal. Once we're done with that, I'll show you how to mount it to the rear set bracket itself. So back up the bus a little bit. Need to get a little bit of grease here. It's not going to take a ton. What I want to do here is I want to put a little bit on the pivot so that we have something in that channel, okay? I'll start there. And then just kind of run that around in there so we have a thin film of grease. Okay, next up, we're going to go ahead and pass the pivot through the actual brake pedal itself. Okay, I try and keep as much grease as I can away from that hole because we're going to want to get some Loctite in there. I was able to take care of that. So if you get a bunch of grease down in the hole, don't be afraid to spray a little brake clean in the center and just let it roll out. Okay, the short fastener. Definitely want to have some thread locker on this. Drop that through. This is a 4mm internal hex. It's going to be kind of hard to really get final torque on this right now, okay, because there's nothing to support it. So, we'll mount it to our rear set bracket now. Goes right there, okay. Just clean it up a little bit, got a little excess grease here. Kind of tidy that up before we go too much farther. Definitely want to have some thread locker on this. Drop that through, like so. Then we have our brake pedal. This is going to be a 5mm. Sorry, that is a 4mm internal hex. Can you grab our T-handle here? Get this bad boy started. Yeah, Steve's laughing at me right now. It's okay. Truth is, I can't see anything, man. I need glasses super bad, and I'm trying to avoid it. Okay, this is going to have enough mechanical grip here once that adapter is up against the rear set bracket. Allow you to tighten this. Good final torque there. Roll it over, and now we can snug this one up. With this installation, it is also really important you have a couple other stock pieces. You need your stock mounting bolts. Those will both be reused. So we have that washer for the brake pedal, and we have the mounting bolts that are going to be reused. If you want to run a heel guard, you're going to reuse the stock heel guard over here on the brake side of the motorcycle. Okay, now we're going to install the rear set on the brake side of the bike. We've got it all assembled, we're ready to go. Your brake pedal here, we showed you this with the removal. There is a pin here, and there's also a cotter key that we're just going to reuse. Thin film of grease in there, just to make sure everything's going to be moving smoothly. Slide that in through the clevis. Pivot through, like so. Here's the cotter pin. You should be able to reuse this. This is the second set of rear sets we put on this bike, and it's the same pin, so. Almost always can reuse these. Try to be gentle with it when you disassemble. Push it through. And you're going to spread the legs back around, kind of wrap them around the pin. And kind of finish this off with a pair of pliers, just make my life a little bit easier. Plus Steve was laughing at me, I was having a hard time with it. like so. So you want to get wrapped around nice like that. Everything's moving freely. Feeling all super good. With the Woodcraft Rearsets, you do not have the ability to reuse the rear brake light switch, the OE brake light switch. If you want to have that, you're going to have to get a banjo brake light switch and put it in here on your brake banjo. It's 2 wires. I promised a video forever installing one of those, and you know what? I suck because I have not gotten that done yet. I apologize. We will get to that, I hope, someday. Okay, now let's come on over the bike. Just gonna mock this up. That all looks goody good. There's your master over there. I dig that. We have some spacers for the back side of that. Let's go ahead and bolt this to the frame of the bike. Best practice here is certainly going to be just, use a little bit of thread locker. Now when you put these in, you need to get both of the bolts started. Nice and even, finger tight, before you put any torque to it. If you're not comfortable working without a torque wrench, go ahead and grab one. The instructions oftentimes will include torque specs. If they don't, readily available online. Maybe mimic the OE torque specs. So you see, just run these both down flush before I put any torque to them. This is a 6 mil internal hex. Okay, and that all looks good. Okay, we need to get these spacers in between the back of the rear set bracket and the master cylinder itself. The back of the rear set bracket is relieved, so when you slide that back there, this is going to dip in a little bit. It's going to be held in place. You could install this, kind of mock this up before you put it up onto the frame. As you can clearly see, I did not do that. So what I'm going to do is just kind of manipulate things a little bit to get me the room I need. Just slip these in. And once it's in there, it's going to kind of hold itself in place, like so. Do the uppermost one. Okay. A little more thread locker. Master cylinder bolts, another great place to use some thread locker. That is a 5 mil internal hex. Just get it started, then stop. There are a few optional pieces that are available from Woodcraft for this particular Rearset kit. One would be brake pedal return spring. Another would be the banjo bolt brake light switch, okay? And then of course, for the toe pieces, if you prefer, they have the optional folding toe pieces you can put on there. Okay, once again, before you put any final torque to it, just get them both seated nicely like so. Right here. Nice and even. Okay. Very important to understand before you ride this motorcycle. Okay? Take the boots or the shoes you're going to wear when you ride it. Get both the rear sets on, jump on the bike, and let's dial in the controls. Okay? Let's get that brake pedal just the right height for your riding style and the footwear that you're using. Okay? Super important that you do that, and double check everything before you take the bike out. Make sure everything's tight, because if you leave some of this loose, certainly this would be a safety hazard. Finishing touch, they do have a cap that you can drive in to the end of the foot peg, kind of just finishes it off. A little light pressure like so, pops right in, nice little finishing touch. You see we have a lot of knurling on this foot peg. These aren't overly hard on the boot, but they do offer a good amount of grip. Solid mount foot pegs give a tremendous amount of feel, so that's a real improvement here. And you also see right here in the center of the peg, there is a relief. And the point behind that is, if you say you have a higher speed crash and this thing is sliding along, it just encourages that if this grabs, instead of distorting the frame of the motorcycle or damaging the rear set bracket itself, that could be the point of failure. So all you do is lose part of your foot peg, but you help to preserve the frame. And that's the stuff with Woodcraft, with the owner being the engineer for all the parts. You get that built into these things. He's always working forward and thinking and learning from his own riding. Okay, now we're on to the shift side. Typically this is a little bit easier. If you see my rear set videos before, shift side is usually less dramatic. This kit is capable of both standard and GP shift, which is reverse shift pattern. I'm going to show you that as we go through the install, and there's something that we learned here too. There's a little modification you'll need to make to use GP shift. In standard shift pattern, this thing's going to bolt right on the bike, no problem at all, no fuss, no muss. As with the other side, before we do anything, we have to prepare this for installation. I'm going to start by double checking the fastener here on the shift knuckle. Woodcraft has supplied a nylock locking nut here on the other side of the heim joint, so you don't need thread locker. Steve said I said that a lot over on the brake side, so that's like thread locker number 51. Okay, make sure that's tight. This, of course, you don't do anything with until it's installed. That actually needs to be out until we get it on the bike. The pedal itself comes disassembled, same as on the brake side. So we'll get this all dialed in right now. You'll note there are two different length fasteners here. If you look at the back of the pivot, you'll see we have a taller shoulder and a shorter shoulder. The longer one is going to go in the taller shouldered hole. Toe piece also comes disassembled. Just remove that because we need to put thread locker on all of those. I said it again. You'll note here the heim joint is also loose, even though this one does come with a locking nut. Really, in my mind, no need to put any thread locker here. You'll see they do provide multiple holes, both here and on the shift knuckle. That just helps you really dial in the angle, and that's something we'll talk about later on. 9 times out of 10, you're good to go with the hole furthest away. And you want to be in the hole furthest away because that gives you the greatest mechanical advantage. Mechanical advantage is a key to smooth shifting. Okay, and that's going to run down far enough that we get to the nylon portion of the nut, the insert, so we'll have that thread locker. Snug that up. So we're good to go there. We're going to put some of this blue stuff on the fasteners for the shift pedal here. I want to make sure that I'm putting the right one in the right hole. The longer of the two goes here. Shorter one here. Once you have them both seated, feel free to use final torque. Wipe this up just a little bit. Okay, now the toe piece. You need to make a decision on where you want this to be. And that's going to vary from rider to rider. It's nice to have the ability, to customize these. I'm going to go right here. Little blue stuff on that bolt. Super important before you torque that up, you make sure that you have that locator pin in one of the holes. Okay, if you don't have it in the hole and you start torquing it, you could possibly damage it. Okay, so now the shift pedal, it is ready to rock and roll. The hardware needed to install that is all included, of course. You have a pivot, you have a wave washer that's going to go right here. Okay, here's the fastener that's going to slide through there like so. Actually, just probably pop that out for right now, and then you're going to have a washer that will go between this and the rear set bracket itself. Okay, it's foot peg time. This is really simple stuff. We're just going to put it in the same hole we did on the other side. A bit of thread locker here. Six mil internal hex. Go ahead and torque that, like so. At this point, we need to lubricate our shift pedal. It's super important that this is smooth, okay? So, I'll grab some grease, and what you want to do is get a nice coating inside here. Nice, even coating. Once we've done that, here is the actual piece of hardware that it pivots on, the wave washer. Just puts a little pressure against it. You go ahead and drop that through the hole. This washer is going to go between the rear set bracket and that mounting hardware. I already see we got a little bit of grease there in the center. It's going to reduce the effectiveness of our thread locker. Just want to try and get some of that out of there. Just some of the excess. Here's the hardware that's going to hold our shift pedal to the rear set bracket. That spring back on there. Just push this through now. Hold this to the bracket. Five mil internal hex. Go ahead and torque that down. Nice and smooth, no binding. Okay, I've already showed you this comes with its own shift knuckle, okay, capable of GP or standard shift. It also includes shift rod. So you're replacing all the heim joints, the shift knuckle, and the shift rod when you do this kit. Some kits do reuse some of the OE parts for maybe the shift rod, maybe the shift knuckle. Okay, so one is going to be right-handed thread, the other will be left. We're going to determine which is which. All right. What I like to do when I'm setting this up is try to get them as even as possible to begin with. Just kind of run it down like so. Now we're ready to come over to the motorcycle and bolt this to the frame of the bike. Earlier, we talked about how these are designed a little bit different. Okay, you're able to mount this in the upper or in the lower hole. If you use the lower hole, you're raising the foot peg, okay? You would only use the lower hole if you've used the upper hole on the brake side for the foot peg mount. We did not do that. We used the lower hole, so we have to use the upper hole. So it's basically the reverse, okay? No different than on the other side. Use some of this blue stuff. And we have a 6 mil internal hex. We'll seat both fasteners. Just finger tight before we put any torque to it at all. Okay, so one of the most important things when you're installing a Rearset kit, it's going to be the angle between the shift knuckle arm and the arm that comes off the shift pedal. Let's pretend we're going to be standard shift here. So you want to begin by getting that into position, right? And we may end up moving that, so we'll just kind of mock it up lightly. I need to make sure that I have plenty of travel for this to both, of course, up and downshift, unrestricted, okay? May even be able to just kind of come forward one spline. Nope, a little contact with the bodywork there, I'm out. So I'm going to bring it back one, where I started. Put the fastener in there. The way this is designed, even if that fastener's loose, like it is right now, see that won't slide off of there, okay? There is a groove that's machined into the shaft, the selector shaft on that trans, that the bolt rides in once you insert it into the knuckle. Go ahead, we'll torque this bad boy up right now. Okay. Yep, there's gonna be no conflicts there. Now, the angle here and the shifter is what we want to focus on. You want that to be as close to 90 degrees as humanly possible. And where you can see that angle, we've got that opened up just a little bit. This still should be able to give us really smooth shifting, okay? If I move it forward one spline, there is just that possibility of tiniest bit of contact with the bodywork at the very end. I'll show you that again, because I gotta tell you, if I could pick it just off position, it would be that. Right there. Because that is a super nice 90. I mean, that's spot on. You know, in this case, what I am going to do with this bike, I think, is I'm going to leave it here. And that's so at the very end of the travel, it's probably, the contact is probably not going to create any conflict at all. So I'm probably going to leave that, okay? That angle means that much. That mechanical advantage is your gateway to smooth, accurate shifting. And that's a big part of what we're doing here with the Rearsets is, you know, you want that smooth and accurate shifting. At this point, you need to get your jam nuts ready. I got a little trick I'll show you here too that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's get our jam nuts into position. Go ahead and tighten the first one. Okay, now something else that's really critical, it's going to be the plane that each of these heim joints rides on, okay? You can see when I tightened this, it forced it this way, okay? And now when we go to tighten the other side, you want to make sure that you put this heim joint on a very similar plane to that one, okay, before you tighten it. If you have them all bound up, one is hard in one direction, the other is, hard in the other, that is going to create unnecessary resistance and friction. How you test for that is when you're done, if you look at what I'm doing right there, the way I'm wiggling this back and forth, there is plenty of movement in those heim joints, okay? If you get done tightening the jam nuts and you go to rotate it and the thing's like not moving at all, okay, it's totally bound up, then you need to look at the plane those are on, make the necessary adjustment and dial that in. That is that critical. Finite adjustments of the shift pedal itself can be made with the toe piece end. Super easy to do, sometimes even easier than adjusting this. On this kit, the easiest way to get to that would probably be just taking these two little fasteners out. You could also take off this if you want to leave the pedal itself together. And the shifter adjustment's way more critical than the brake side for sure. The brake side, number one, most people probably never touch it, especially on the racetrack. And number two, just, the feel is not that big of a deal. So you could just pull that off, and now you've got open access here. You come into it with just an Allen wrench, take it right off, put it where you want it, tighten it back up, and you could leave these undisturbed. And in terms of putting this back on, that's just super simple. I mean, you're going to put it back in the same exact spot where you began, and then tighten it down. So to recap here, with the standard shift, I need to ride it a little bit and see if I have any conflict. It's going to just barely touch the bodywork, but I really strive to maintain those angles. So we'll do that. If there is any issues with the conflict, a couple of things you could do, man. You could just take a Dremel and relieve that just a tiny little bit. That'd be one way to do it. Nobody's ever going to notice because it's you're talking millimeters. Or you could come back, take it apart, rotate this back once, adjust your shift rod, and then go try and ride the bike again. So here is standard shift. When we come back, I'm going to show you what it takes to make this kit GP shift. Okay, now we're going to talk GP shift. Let's take this shift knuckle off. In order to get the bike into reverse shift pattern, all that needs to happen is simply flipping this supplied shift knuckle, okay? I'll show you that. Okay, and if you look right now, you'll see you definitely have a little conflict here, and it's with that cover. I double, triple checked the instructions. I didn't see any mention made of this. I do have a call into Woodcraft. I haven't been able to get a hold of Eric today, but I'll show you what we're gonna do here for a solution is we're gonna take off this stock countershaft sprocket cover. So that was an 8mm hex. I've got a 5mm internal hex. It comes right off. Okay, now get in here and check clearance. You're going to want it right there. Looks pretty good. The issue that we have, it's going to be the height. The shift knuckle is a little bit longer than the stock one, creates better mechanical advantage. There's good reasons for it. Okay, now when I tighten this up, notice I'm kind of pulling outward just a little bit. I want to make sure that that retainer bolt is riding on the outermost portion of that groove. It's machined into the selector shaft, like so. And that is to get me as much space as possible between our chain and that. If Steve looks down in there, you'll see that. Now the issue that we had was interference with the cover, okay? In order to make this work, what we would do is we'll take a Dremel and just relieve this enough to get a space for this to operate in without any conflicts and or restriction, okay? Once again, you don't want it rubbing on anything. I think we have good clearance here between the chain and that, so I don't have any concern for that, but we still have to have that thing operating with zero conflict or friction generated. So very minor adjustment, and realistically, this doesn't have a lot of impact on a street rider. Most street riders are going to stay in street pattern. This is more of a track day or a racing modification, and most track day riders or racers, they have very little issue with drilling holes or modifying things slightly on the bike. So from what I see here, if you want to keep this on, that is what you would need to do in order to facilitate that. And based on how this covers part of the mount here, that has the rear set bracket where it attaches to the subframe and the frame of the bike, I think keeping this is probably the best possible option. Okay, so let's just wrap this all up. The Rearset Kit is capable of both standard and GP shift, which is awesome. We have 12 adjustment positions to choose from. That's quite a lot. It's a creative way that they got to that. The quality of the kit is great. They do a great job over at Woodcraft. The engineering is really strong, especially on the Kawasaki stuff. Eric Wood, the owner of Woodcraft, through his Penguin Racing School, has a tight relationship with Kawasaki. They ride Kawasaki bikes. So he has Ninja 400s. They're riding on those bikes, racing on those bikes, crashing on those bikes, and you learn a lot when you're doing that. And you'll see that in the final product for the things he offers for the 400, okay? His Kawasaki stuff is always just a little extra special because of his direct involvement with Kawasaki. On the other side, the brake side, if there was any criticism I was going to give this, okay, being that this is a newer bike, and some people entry level, first time bike, I say super cool bike, even cool if you've been riding a long time, but a lot of new riders, they're going to want to have the ability to reuse that OEM brake light switch, and I would kind of like to have seen that blended into this. It's not a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. You put a banjo bolt in there and wire it up with the rear brake master. It's super simple. If you want a return spring for the rear brake, which also is not a huge deal, Woodcraft sells that very affordable piece. Beyond that, the engineering, the quality, and the fact that the replacement parts for this bike, okay, you buy these rear sets, you jack up any one of these pieces you see, you can buy just that, literally just that. And they do a phenomenal job over there of maintaining inventory of those pieces. These guys will go as far as to, like, let's say that they don't have this bracket and you need it. Well, if they have a full rear set kit, I can't tell you how many times they've been like, don't worry about it. We'll just cut a kit open. We'll put that into inventory as a piece kit, and we're gonna get your rider what they need, because it's really important to them that if you've chosen their product and you've had a crash, you need a replacement part, that they get you back on the track or the road as soon as possible. And that all in itself is a great reason in my mind to choose Woodcraft. I'm Brian Van, sportbiketrackgear.com. This is the Woodcraft rear set install on our 2018 Kawasaki Ninja 400 project bike.